Hello again, and welcome to today's webinar by Philanthropia and Trust about donor research. I'm really happy that you all joined for this super important topic, and I think we can get started right away. So again, today we'll talk about donor research and why it is the key to successful fundraising and why it is so important to spend time researching potential donors and finding out what their priorities are and finding your perfect match. Just a couple of housekeeping rules. We will have time for questions at the end. So we have a designated 10 to 15 minutes for questions. I would ask you to use the Q&A box for questions though, because the chat is open as well, of course, and you can use that to interact with each other, to network with everybody who's in this webinar today. There'll be a couple of questions or quizzes that I ask you to answer. So that is what the chat is for. And I would ask you to use the Q&A box for questions that you have for me, because otherwise it's very difficult for me to find the questions in the end and to go through everything. So please use the Q&A box for questions that you want me to address in the end, and the chat to just Mary sharing where you're tuning in from, sharing what your interest in this webinar is, and network with each other if that is interesting for you. Okay, me and Zoom, we are not best friends. Sometimes it doesn't work for me to click in my presentation. So you will, every time you see that frustrated look on my face and me doing something, that's when I try to move the slides and it doesn't always work, but I hope I'll get there today. My name is Eva. I've been working with Philanthropia for almost 10 years now, and I've been working in the field of fundraising and resource mobilization for even longer. My PhD is in geography. It was about a method to plan development projects more inclusively and more sustainably. I did my research mostly in Nepal and Ecuador. And I've worked for 7 years in Nepal as a project manager and responsible for resource mobilization for several smaller NGOs. Since 2019, I've been back in Germany, started my own company here, and I've been working with many, many different organizations, from huge ones like UNICEF and ITU to regional ones like Caritas here, and very, very small NGOs, grassroots NGOs in developing countries as well. So that is kind of my background. If you've joined a Philanthropia webinar before, you've probably seen me before because I do most of those. And if you're new, then welcome, and I hope to see you again in one of our other events. So this is the basic model of resource mobilization that we base all of our trainings and all of our understanding on. It has basically 3 steps, which are all very important, but today we'll talk about the first step. It is important to understand, though, that all 3 steps are important to be a successful fundraiser, to be a successful resource mobilizer. The first step, obviously, is to find donors. If you go even back a little bit, the very first step is to develop a project, to develop great projects that could be of interest for donors and that deliver impact, etc. That is the very, very first step. But we're assuming that you already have your project planned, you have a great project plan, you know what you want to do. So now you need funding for this. So then you go and find a donor. That sounds very easy, but today we'll show you a couple of techniques that actually make it easy. But it is, I would say, almost the most crucial point in this process, because I talk to many organizations who say, well, we've sent our proposal out to 50 donors and now no one bites. We're not successful. What's happening? It's so difficult. And most of the time, the mistake is that they didn't do enough research and they didn't find the perfect fit. Because if you do great research and if you find a donor that is really perfect for the kind of work that you want to do, that is a perfect partner for the impact that you want to deliver, then the chances of your proposal being successful are much higher. And then you don't have to send out 50 proposals to get maybe 1 answer, but then you just send out 2, and you're much more successful. So this part is super important also to be able to do the next steps well, to be able to do good, to have a good engagement strategy, good networking, and to write a great proposal. Because without knowing what a donor is about without completely understanding what their mission is, what their vision is, and what kind of work they want to support, it's very challenging to produce a quality proposal. So the first step is to find a donor. That's what we're talking about today. But again, the other steps, the second one that is very important for us is engaging with the donor networking, whatever you want to call it, but developing a relationship before you send anything. Because you should never forget that lots of money, we estimate sometimes between 50 and 70% is actually negotiated and not given out through open application processes. So it's not always an open call where everybody can send a proposal, but many times money is given to NGOs that are already known, that are within the network. And to be known, of course, you have to network. You have to get to know that foundation. So after you've identified potential partners, you need to network with them and you need to become the NGO that is on their radar when they have money to give. And then only we get to the third stage, which is applying. Many times when I talk to NGOs and they say, well, we want to do fundraising, so teach us how to write a proposal. That's not the only thing that is important. Of course, it is important, but it's not the crucial thing. You need to have a great proposal, obviously, but if you're sending it to the wrong donor, it doesn't matter how great your proposal is. If you have the perfect donor fit, maybe they will even be a little bit forgiving if you don't have the perfect proposal. But the other way around, it never works. So just be very aware here that all of those steps are important. All of those steps belong together. But you start with the research, and if you don't do a great job there, the rest is going to become much more difficult for you. So why should you research donors? Well, first of all, you need to find good partners, because otherwise, I mean, there's so many donors out there. We will look at some numbers. So you obviously can't address everyone. You can't address every single donor out there. You need to be efficient with how many proposals you want to write. So you want to write few proposals to the right partners instead of working on proposals nonstop and sending out stuff that maybe will never be successful and that will maybe never even get read. You need to make go or no go decisions. So when you have a list of potential donors because they fund in your country or whatever, you need to decide where do we want to apply. And for that, you need to research them. You need to understand what they actually want to do. And it also gives you more flexibility if you have a list that you can work on. But in general, you need to research donors, first of all, to know where you want to send a proposal, and then to understand the donor. So you understand what they want to achieve, so you can try to become a partner to them. Because that's a little bit of a general concept that I think is very important, that you don't consider yourself or your NGO as the one receiving money and the donor just giving money. Of course, that's the reality. But if you think of ways to become to enter a partnership, because a donor wants to achieve something, you want to achieve something, so you have to work together to achieve it together. You're helping them as well to fulfill their mission. You look at it that way, you're looking for a partnership where you bring something to the table and they bring something to the table, and then everybody benefits. But to be able to do that, you need to understand exactly what they want to do. You need to understand what they're all about and how they want to achieve it. Okay. So why do you need a strategy behind this? This is the next step. Research is, like I said, is a process. There's so many donors out there, you can get lost in it. You can research forever. If I sit down, use all the tools that I have at my disposal, and I have many tools at my disposal, and research for an entire week for a project, even after 2 weeks, I would still find more donors and new potential fits. Maybe not the best ones, maybe not huge ones, but there's always more to find because you can just go on and go on and go on. There's a huge volume of foundation. So you need a strategy behind it to be efficient with your research. These are some numbers of how many foundations are out there. In the US, for example, you have 150,000 foundations. In the European Union. It's a little bit less, but numbers are growing very quickly. In Germany alone, we have, I think, between 20 and 25,000 foundations, which is a huge number for a country. Well, we're not a small country, but still having that many foundations is a huge number. And often we forget that also in other continents now there's a thriving foundational landscape. So in Asia, there's around 50,000 already. Africa doesn't have that many yet, but it's also growing because many economies in Africa are growing very quickly. People want to have an impact. People are looking for ways to invest their money into something good. So also there you will find many, many foundations. But if you just think about it, there's so much opportunity with all these foundations, but obviously not all of those foundations are a good fit for you. You need to be very picky because you don't want to be sending out 150,000 proposals, obviously, to every single foundation. You want to send 3 proposals to the best fits. So out of that huge potential that is out there, you have to be very smart about choosing which ones you want to contact and you want to get in touch with. There's also a lot of competition out there. So on the one hand, you have all this opportunity. On the other hand, you have growing competition, specifically now with all the tools that are available for finding information with the internet, but then also with AI in the last 2 to 3 years. The competition out there for funding from foundations is huge and it's growing very quickly. If you look at the US, say we said 150,000 foundations, but 1.6 million charities, NGOs, or whatever you want to call it. Lots of those are very local, often church charities or very local organizations that obviously will not be competing with you if you're from a developing country, but still they are there and they also enter the market. In the UK, we have around 170,000 charities. India is a country with 3.4 million NGOs, so many, many NGOs that might be competing with some of you if they work in a similar field. And in Somalia, we have 5,000. So you see, the competition is huge as well. Many NGOs are using AI now to optimize their application process. There's so many tools out there to find donors, to find potential donors. So it's different than 20 years ago when you needed to kind of know about an opportunity from maybe from your colleagues or through other sources to be able to access it. Now all the information is out there on the internet. Everybody can access it, and it's much easier to write a good sounding proposal with the help of AI. Here in Germany, for example, I'm in contact with a couple of colleagues that work in foundations, and they all say this year they have up to 3 times as many proposals as in other years. There's different reasons to that. Many of the budget cuts have really affected the sector. In Germany, we also have tons of budget cuts. Then USAID disappearing, all of that has obviously affected the sector. But at the same time, AI also makes it easier for people to write a proposal. They have ideas, they have a project. Maybe before there was a language barrier, it was too complicated, etc. Now everything's easier, so more people do it. So foundations get inundated with proposals, which makes it even more important to do the research proper before, because that way you can make sure that you're really the perfect fit for that foundation. You have to be the one shining out of the big pile of proposals that they get, and the pile is getting bigger and bigger every year. You have to be the one that is the perfect fit. And the better you know the foundation that you want to apply with, the better your mission and their mission align, the easier it is for somebody to say, well, this is a good fit. And I'm absolutely not saying you shouldn't use AI to write your proposals. I think it's a very helpful tool if you know how to use it and where to use it. But even for AI to write your proposal, you need to give the AI great prompts. And for that, you need to know things. You need to understand the donor to be able to write something they want to read. And then, of course, you can use AI tools to help you with that, to help you with language, polishing, etc. But the knowledge about who you're applying to still needs to be in your head and still needs to be researched by you so that you can really understand and adjust your project. Because otherwise, AI alone cannot write the perfect proposal for a donor because it doesn't understand all those connections that you have to understand. So now it's going to become a little bit more practical. What are some research methods? So how can you actually find donors, to start preparing a list and find more information about them? Because it's not just identifying donors, that is one step, but then it's also researching them further, obviously. So you start off with a name where you think, oh, this might be a fit, and then you have to look deeper into that donor to really understand, is it really a good fit? Do we really belong, or can we really go together? Can I support this donor in achieving their mission? Do I want to work with that donor? That's also a question that we have to ask ourselves. Do we align in our values and in what we stand for? And in general, does it work? So the first step is to just have a name and then to look deeper into it. And these methods help you with both. But obviously, first you need some names of potential donors that you can then research further. So now we have our small quiz where I wanted to ask some input from you. What do you think? What is the quickest, maybe quick and dirty, but the quickest method to find potential donors for your project? Is it a Google search? Is it to use a database? Or is it to check the competition? Maybe you can just quickly type in what you think, A, B, or C, in the chat, so we can get an opinion. What you think is the quickest way to find potential donors. I don't really like the word competition so much because it implies that we're all competing for something, like we're against, NGOs are working against each other, but in general, we all want to achieve the same thing. So yeah, it's kind of our competition if there's another NGO that does similar work. But yeah, in general, the word competition is not my favorite word, but you could say partners or other NGOs in your field. So I see that most, some say C, but I think B is the one that was said mostly. And of course, they're all okay. I don't know why Zoom doesn't let me click. Yeah, well, okay. After 3 times clicking, it moves, but it always takes a while. They are all good ways of finding donors. I think Google search is a bit more difficult because oftentimes it brings up stuff that is already outdated, etc. A database obviously is also a quick way, but I think the quickest way is to check the competition. Because if you look at NGOs that do similar work, maybe in the same community that you're working in the same area, same country, and you see who's funding them, you get a very quick list of donors that can potentially also fund you. And the good thing about that, and that is, I think, the difference with a database as well, is that you know that they're active. Because in a database, and we also run our database, and I work for 2 databases where I check profiles, so I can tell you from my perspective as well, we do our best to check the profiles to keep them as accurate and current as possible. But in some cases, foundations change very quickly if they actually do fund, and sometimes they write something on their website, and of course we try to cross-check with everything, but it's not always necessarily 100% what they do in reality. So they might be writing, okay, we work with children's projects in Africa, but in reality they're only funding something in Nigeria. But it doesn't say that clearly on the website. So then also in the database, it's a bit difficult to kind of figure out, okay, they're only working in that country. But if you check the competition or an organization that works in your community and you see, okay, this foundation is funding them, then you actually know they're active, they're doing the work, and they're working in your community. So that is a very, very good start to go about your donor research. A database is also great. Of course, also Google will be your best friend in researching them further, but to come up with that first list, I think that is the quickest way. And you need to look for a match, obviously. We have developed a checklist as well. We call it the eligibility checklist, I think with 8 questions that you should ask yourself before you decide to research a donor further. And you all have to be able to answer, you have to be able to answer all of the questions with a definite yes. And only if it's a yes, you should go further. We can also send out the this list for you in the follow-up email when you also get other materials, because I think it's very, very helpful to have this checklist at hand. The 3 most important areas, of course, are they a thematic match? So if you work in health, do they fund health or do they fund education? You need to figure that out. It needs to be a fit. Do they fund where you work? And this sounds like the easiest part, but it's, in my experience, the part where most mistakes happen. Like I always, maybe you've heard me tell this story before, but it's so crucial for me that I keep telling it. We've had a colleague who worked for a human rights organization, and they had a call for proposals for Asia, and they said in the call, very at the top, it said like every country can apply except for India. For some reason, they had a different program for India, and 50% of proposals they received were from India. So it seems like the most straightforward one. Just check where they fund, and if they don't fund where you are, then it's a no. But people kind of gloss over that many, many times. So check if they fund where you work and where you are. And I think it's very human that sometimes we kind of, if everything fits and that thing doesn't fit, then our brain doesn't want to register it. But that's why we developed this checklist. So you really have to go through point by point and say yes or no. And so you don't give your brain the excuse to kind of not pay attention, because you have to figure it out. Because if you apply, if you're not eligible, then you'll not get the grant. It doesn't matter how amazing your proposal, it doesn't matter how many hours you've spent writing that proposal. If the donor doesn't fund your kind of work or the area you work in or the types of activities that you want to do, then you're not going to get any support. And that's, of course, an issue. and you don't want to you don't want to waste your own time writing a proposal or the donor's time having to review a proposal if it's a no from the get-go. The type of support is also important, that it is the kind of support that you're looking for. Some donors only give in-kind contributions, or some donors only fund specific activities. In Germany, many, many times we have the issue that donors only fund personnel costs in a very specific way. So if we can't offer that way, then we don't have to apply at all. For example, if I have an employee that is working for me full-time and I want to fund that employee, and the donor says, well, but we only pay freelance cost, well, then I don't have to apply there. And all these things sound super basic, but you would be surprised to see how many people make those mistakes. In Germany, I've also worked with an organization that graded proposals, and it's people that work full-time in fundraising. They have a full-time, fully funded job just doing this, and still 30 to 35% of proposals fail because of formal reasons, because they make these super simple mistakes. That's why we kind of drill this home so much, because it still happens so many times. And it's just a waste of your time and your energy if you write proposals to donors that are not a good match. So check this really thoroughly if the donor is a good match and if you want to put them into your donor research map. Okay. So now we get into the methods. The first method we've already mentioned, because I think this is how we always start. Even when we do donor research for a big organization, because this is a service we offer, we start like this, checking similar organizations. So this is a bit older, but I think it's still a very good example. You can find this information on the website, in the annual report, in other reports, sometimes in newspaper articles. You can find information about who funded the work of the organization that is maybe working in a similar field. So here, it's the example of Action Aid Nepal from 2016. It's a bit older, but again, you can still find the same things in annual reports now. And it says in the annex, in the end, who funded their projects. So you see the project, for example, supporting women in Nepal to rebuild their lives after disaster. This was after the earthquake. The donor was the Alborada Foundation. So if you work in the same field, if you have a project in Nepal working with women to support them in mitigation, climate change mitigation maybe, or natural disaster, etc., it would be a good idea to put this foundation on your radar, on your list, and research it further. If they're still doing this kind of work, if they're open to applications, how would be the process, etc. And this goes for all of these, of course. You can see here another women's project. It was the European Commission, Early Childhood Development, Guy Foundation. It's a good way to start your list. Of course, you need to know your competition, other organizations that do similar work. Of course, they need to share this information, but most of the times they do, especially if it's foundations that that are publicly listed or that have an interest in being on the website as well. Often you also find it at the bottom, or on the website you will find a category that says our supporters, our team. Sometimes it's a bit hidden, but you oftentimes can find it. And that's a great start, because you know these foundations are active and they're actually giving money, and they're not just working operatively. Here's another example from Save the Children, where you can also see the organizations that have given to Save the Children, and you get some ideas on where you can start. There's sometimes even an overview of how much they gave. Sometimes you find all supporters, also major donors. I think with major donors, it's a bit different, because many times if one person has decided to give 10,000 euros to a charity, maybe they don't have another 10,000 lying around. So if you don't know them, I think with individuals, it's a bit difficult, but foundations should then be part of your donor research table, and you should research them further and see if they might be a good fit. Then we do have all those online databases that you've also mentioned. And again, it's not wrong to say that's a good way to find a preliminary list as well. There's many from the charity commissions. For example, in Germany, we have the same from the Association of Foundations. In America, it's called Candid, what used to be the Foundation Center. It's still the Foundation Center, but the database is now called Candid. And in all of these databases, you put in usually where you work, what kind of project, what kind of area you work in, what kind of project you're looking to fund, and then they give you a list of foundations that that could be a good fit. And as I said, these databases can be of very different quality, and it's not that easy to keep them really accurate. I can tell you that, because for example, in Germany, we have a database from the Foundation Association, and they base their database on the statutes of the foundations, which sounds logical, no? If you put in the statutes what you want to do, then that is probably what you fund. But in reality, that looks often very different, because you can put in the statutes, many foundations put lots of stuff, so they are open to work in all these areas. But then if you look at it in reality, they just fund one of those 5 areas that they've mentioned in their statutes. But of course, for your research process, that makes it very difficult, because you will get a huge list and you have to really go through it again. But still, it's a great starting point. And again, there's paid ones and free ones. The paid ones are often better. With Candid, for example, that's really interesting, because it also shows you, or you can find out which foundation, or which you can put in your country. Let's put it like that. From the end, you say who funded projects in my country last year from the US, and then you get a list of grants that had been given out. And of course, that is the same. It shows you active foundations, because in some of the databases that are more static, you also get a lot of duds, a lot of foundations that are not actively funding anymore. We have our own database as well, donordatabase.org, that we work a lot on to keep it accurate. And there you can find 8,000 plus donors. We'll also include a link to that in the follow-up email, so you can check it out if you want. Then, of course, once you have some names, you have to research them further, and then you can use the donor websites to find out more about what they actually fund, what their focus is, and what kind of projects they want to fund. When some foundations have very clear guidelines on their website on how to apply, what they fund, etc. But what is also super interesting is to check out the projects that they actually did fund. Because you can write many, many words about what you want to do, but it's not always 100% what happens next. So for me, it's always interesting to check first what they say that they fund and then look at what they actually fund. Sometimes it's not, or it gives you information about how they interpret what they've written. One time I remember I was looking for funding for a project in Germany, for was a health project, a local, like in a rural village. They wanted to put up a health post. And I found a program, and from the description, at first I thought, maybe. So I clicked their website, I read what it said, and then I said, no, that's not a good fit. So I moved on. But then I found a project that was very similar. So I thought, okay, like I said, this method, I checked who gave money to them, and it was actually that donor. So the interpretation of the words that they used was very different to mine. I would have never thought they fund this kind of work from what they were explaining. So sometimes it's really good to look at the projects that they actually fund to get a better idea of what they want to see. On the websites, oftentimes you also find people that you can contact to find out more, to start your networking process, to develop a relationship. It gives you an idea of how to apply, but also who to contact. So here, for example, on the Ford Foundation, it tells you how you can submit an idea, but it also says that there's many, many applications. I don't even know if they have this completely open program anymore. It's a couple of years ago when they shared data that they said that they received 40,000 unsolicited proposals per year. 40,000. And now this number must be much higher because of techniques like technologies like AI. So I'm not sure if they have this open submission form anymore. But what you do always find is the people that work there, the team. So you can find out who would be responsible for your area of work, for the country that you work in, who could be someone that you could contact and get in touch with to find out more about that foundation, to deepen your research and get a deeper understanding of what they actually want to do. Then you also use Google search to find, so here we have this example we're going through with the Ford Foundation. If you assume you work in Brazil, this guy, Aurelio Viana, would be the senior program officer. So if you want to get in touch with him, you could either use the address from the website, or if it doesn't always have that. So you can use Google as well to find his email, to find his contact information, or of the person that you think would be responsible for your line of work, just to have someone that you can get in touch with and learn more about the foundation from. LinkedIn is also a great tool to get in touch with people and to understand a bit more about the foundation. Because if someone like Aurelio here is connected with you on LinkedIn, maybe has seen some of your posts, it's easier to get in contact, easier for your networking process. But also, again, it gives you a deeper understanding of what they understand under their funding. Of course, LinkedIn, people have their private profile, so it's not always, if he posts something, you can't be 100% sure that that is the Ford Foundation's position. But it probably is. And if he's the decision maker, it's very good to understand what this guy thinks is important. So following people that you know are decision makers at foundations, or that you know are important positions at the foundations that you want to work with, is always a great idea to network with them on LinkedIn as well, and to use that platform to grow your network. We have a full course on networking with donors, because there's some other tips and tricks as well on how you can develop a great relationship with people that work at a donor's office or with a donor in general, with a foundation, once you've identified them. And this networking process also contributes to your research, obviously. In the circle that we saw in the beginning, it looks like, oh, you do research and then you do network and then you do application. But of course, all those phases blend together. You research and then you network, and during the networking process, you learn more. So you add that to your research file. And then everything comes together when you write your proposal. We have a course on networking and on proposal writing as well. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can also check out those resources on our website, philanthropia.org. Another great way to research donors and to find out more about them if they are in the US are tax forms, because foundations have to release their tax filings, and it's called the 990 PF. It's a tax form where they have to write everything, all their assets. You can find out what the CEO earns. That's always interesting. But you can also see where their grants went. So if you're interested in a US foundation, an American foundation, but you're not sure if they actually fund in your country, you can look up the 990 PF. They are all in the public domain, and you can search the form for your country name, and then you will see where, if they funded in your country, and if they did, where it went to. So you see full address of the NGO, etc. It's very open, the system, very, very interesting. Also on how to analyze those, we have a small course on our website. If that's interesting, please check that out, because you can find a lot of valuable information in the 990 PF. We've talked now about techniques to find names, to research them further, etc. But as you can imagine, and I've mentioned in the beginning, it can be very overwhelming, because you could do research forever. You will still find more foundations out there, even if you've done it for 2 weeks already. And you lose track of things. Sometimes you find donors, but then you keep looking, and then you forget about the first ones, etc. So that's why we always recommend you need a system. You need a strategic approach to this, and you need a system to organize your donor research, to be in control and to not miss any deadlines, and to be able to use all the information you collect. Because I'm convinced that many NGOs collect a lot of information about donors, but it gets lost again, because maybe it's stored just in the head of one person, it's not shared with the team, or it gets lost because people forget again. So you need a system to stay organized, and we'll look at the way we organize donor research for our customers, and for ourselves as well. But it's also important to set a time limit for yourself. If you have a project, you should also set a limit for yourself of how long you want to research donors. So I usually, depends on the size of the project, I say either 1 day, 2 days that I will research, and then you get to the next stage. That doesn't mean that you don't collect more information about those donors, but you don't go out looking for new ones if you have a couple of fits. Because again, this can be a process with no ending, so you have to set an ending to it, so that you don't get lost, and that you use your time in the most valuable way. Yeah, why should you organize the research in a strategic way? You'll only spend a limited amount of time on research because you set a limit for yourself. You'll not miss a deadline, because if you have a proper file, either in Excel or in the system that you're using, you will get reminders about deadlines. You will have them there. You will not miss any. Very important is that if you have an organized form, you can share the results with your team and divide tasks and responsibilities, because donor research shouldn't be something that is just in someone's head, but it should be something that is shared in the institutional memory file, in the file where everything about your fundraising activities is stored, so that everybody has access to it. Because your team members might also have stuff to contribute. Maybe you do donor research, you find a foundation, you say, oh, they're a great fit. And then you talk about that with your colleagues, and then someone says, well, I've worked there 5 years ago, so I know someone. Or my colleague, my friend works there, or I know someone. That is super valuable information. But if you don't share your files, if you don't share what you're working on with your team, or if they don't have any way to access these files, then it's not going anywhere. And it will also lead your way ahead, because you will know next steps, you will know where you can apply, and what you can do in the future. This is a sample prospect table that we usually work with. We still work with Excel. I know we sometimes get scolded for that because people say, wow, Excel is so outdated, you should use something new. You can use whichever system you want, but for us, in our experience, Excel still works because it's something everybody can access, everybody can add to. If you have a fancy system to manage your contacts, if you have a customer relation system, perfect, use that. But in our experience, Excel often is enough. It doesn't need to be super fancy and super sophisticated. You just need a way to store all this information and to store new information that you want to add to this file. So it depends on what your organization works with, but I don't think you need to invent something new for all this. So you have this prospect table where you want to fill in all the important information that you found through your donor research process. You start with the name of the foundation, obviously, that you have identified. So, for example, you've opened the annual report of one of the NGOs that works in the same community as you do, and you see a foundation there. So you put that name into your prospect table, the website, the focus area, what areas do they work in, the geographic focus, which countries do they fund in, and then a ranking system. We'll talk about that in a moment. Then the contact information, the general address, but also if you have a personal contact there, that's very helpful. The application info, so how can you apply there? You could either put a link or a text information. For example, here, the Bezos Earth Fund. They have a team of professionals that propose funding. They don't accept unsolicited proposals. Again, that doesn't mean that you can't apply there, but for your process, it means, okay, we need to get in touch with these people. They need to get to know us, so we get an invitation. But that's also the application information. How can you actually get to the point that you can send them something? The financials, how big are they? Because you want to know if you can apply there for $1,000 or for 100,000. And then notes. So notes could be information about what they funded in the past, why you included them in your file, can be notes of when you talk to them, things you learn along the way, tips or tricks that you pick up where you feel like, oh, okay, this shows me that maybe they put a lot of emphasis on the budget. So put that down in this file as well under notes, or you can open as many rows as you, columns. I always confuse those two, columns, I think, as you want, with further information so that it doesn't get lost. Because so many times you talk to a donor on the phone and you get some information and you write it down somewhere, but then when somebody else maybe does the proposal for them, they don't know about this. So this is a way that you can store all the intelligence that you collect about donors in one place. And then we have this ranking system that we use. So we use 1, 2, 3. 1 are the best fits, where you think, okay, this is perfect, we should apply there. That's rank 1. 2 is, we don't know, maybe not a perfect fit. And 3 is not a good fit. And many people ask me then, why don't you just delete the 3s? It's very simple. First of all, things can change. Sometimes a foundation changes their focus. So it's always a good idea to go back and check again. But then also, you do this, and in 2 years, you'll have to update your file. So I'm 100% certain if there are foundations, let's just say hypothetically, the Bloomberg philanthropies, you have them here now. You check everything and you realize, oh no, it's not a good fit. They're not going to fund us. It sounds like it in the beginning because they have the focus areas that we work in, but for reason XYZ, they're not a good fit. In 2 years, you will include them again in your file and do the same process all over because you don't remember. So if you keep even the 3s in your file and note 3 because XYZ, then you're saving yourself work in the future. So I would always include them. If they look like a good fit in the first place, and then they're not a good fit in reality, note that down and leave them in your file so that you know and you don't have to research them again, or the next person who does this exercise doesn't have to research them again in 5 years. So this is basically what we work with and what you can fill out. Now I have a couple of last tips for you. Sorry, I'm already running out of time. I'm always talking a bit too much because I really want to share what we know about this. Some tips to organize your donor prospect table. Segment your donors so you can create categories like bilateral, multilateral, private foundations, or country-wise. Like you see here at the bottom, we do the same. Bi and multilaterals, trust funds, banks, IFIs, UK, EU, etc. Track the interests, note which programs, causes, or campaigns each donor has shown interest in. This allows for more detailed outreach. So under notes, you can say, well, this year the focus was on this kind of project. Next year they're changing their focus, etc. Log the communication history, super important. Record when you reached out, how you reached out. So if you sent an email, if you had a phone call, etc. It prevents duplication and ensures follow-ups, and you know what's happening. There's nothing worse than two people from the same NGO calling the same donor and not knowing about the other person already being in contact. I see that in reality so many times, and that leaves a very bad impression because it gives the impression that your team doesn't talk to each other and that the one person doesn't know what the other is doing. And also, sometimes you need to follow up, sometimes you need to remind people, etc. It's good to have all the communication logged in your file so you know what's happening. Prioritize by potential. Like I said, rank your donors high, medium, low, so that you know who you should contact first and who you should focus on, because obviously on the high ranking ones, and then you can move down your ranking a bit over time. But first you should choose 3 or 2 of the high ranking ones and say, okay, we'll go for those. We'll try to establish a relationship here, and we'll try to send a proposal here. Set reminders for yourself so you can use the spreadsheet or your CRM system to flag dates, deadlines, last donations, if it's about donations, but also anniversaries, important dates for those organizations, etc. Keep notes on feedback. So even if you send a proposal, document the process in that file. And even if you get a no, note that down. Sometimes you will get feedback with a no. So that is important because you learn from it and you'll become better next time. Or you can adjust your approach, but log everything because you forget. And it's important feedback that can help you in the future. And maybe someone else will work on this project in the future. And if you logged everything in your file, it's very easy to understand what happened and to base future activities on that. But if nothing is written down or there's 10,000 emails saved in different places, it's very difficult to understand what happened. Like I said, we have online courses on many of these topics. We have a course on donor research and more methods, going more deeply into how we organize everything as well. So usually that course is $79, but today, because you all joined this webinar, we have a special price of 50% off, $37.50 only. The link, I think my team will post the link. Yeah, it's in the comment, in the chat, sorry, and you can get the discount with the coupon code Fundraise for 35% off the courses. And we also have courses on networking, proposal writing, etc., if that is interesting for you as well. Yeah, these are a couple of our other courses that we offer at the moment. Storytelling and fundraising is also a very important topic because in today's world of AI, storytelling is one way to differentiate yourself from others, and that is super important as well. So please check out what we offer on philanthropia.org. Today's webinar was possible in cooperation with Trust. Trust is a consultancy company that offers many different services. You can also check out what they offer at trustconsultancy.org. And here's a list of a couple of their services. The third-party monitoring, evaluation, needs assessment. It's always very, very helpful to have professionals helping and supporting with projects in this. So if you have any needs in this area, I recommend you contact Trust and see if a cooperation is possible in this field. Yeah, and with that, I come to the end, and I still have time for some questions. to see if anything needs clarification. And I see that there's 2 questions. The one is just a B, so like, okay, that was the answer. Okay, and then if there's access to this presentation, I think we'll share the recording. I'm not 100% sure if we share the presentation. Maybe my team can chime in on this. And you will get all the links that I've mentioned and the eligibility checklist as a link as well in the follow-up email. So you signed up for this, you got a notification about this webinar happening. So you will also get a notification or an email, a follow-up email with this information. There's a question if we organize sessions for local NGOs to support them in proposal writing and how that works. Of course, that is a service that we do offer. We are a consulting company. So as a paid service, we offer like tailor-made webinars and sessions and workshops online and also in person for NGOs all across the world. But it always depends a bit on what you need or what the NGOs need. We also have a lot of resources available on our YouTube channel by Philanthropia. So if you want to see which of our webinars are online there, you can also check out the YouTube channel. But if you if you're interested in organizing something and you have some budget available for that, you can, of course, also reach out to info@philanthropia.org or also ask for a list of available courses, webinars at the same email. Then there's a question, being a small NGO working at the local level, what is the chance of getting funds from big donors? It's definitely challenging, but it's actually not that uncommon, I would say, because this idea of localization, of funding being spent more on the local level, funding supporting local NGOs in the field is there. That is what INGOs, big organizations, big donors are supposed to do. So there are some chances, but of course, it can feel like it's impossible when you're in the field because so much money gets channeled through INGOs and through other organizations. I think things will change a little bit with funding structures changing around the world, but I do think that it is possible to access those funds as well. My colleague Eric said they did an analysis once in Tanzania, and they actually found out that lots and lots of grants were given to small NGOs at the country level by big donors as well. So what you should look out for, I think, are those open calls for proposals, obviously, but also directly trying to network with those big donors. So if they have an office in your country, maybe you could just call and ask if they could they would be interested in meeting with you, so you could get to know them. And in those meetings, it's important that you don't go and just tell them, like throw all of your information on them and say, oh, we need money, but that you learn about them as well and see how you could come together. Again, this is something that we talk a lot about in the networking course on how you can make the most out of those meetings. But I think there are chances. You also have to develop, obviously, a good structure within your NGO to be able to manage grants, and you need to be able to show that. So sometimes a partnership with maybe a more experienced NGO can lead the way to that, but you need to be able to show that you can manage that money. Do you recommend a specific platform to find funding opportunities? Not really. I mean, there's so many out there, and it depends a lot on what kind of project you work in, what kind of funding you're looking for. There's many newsletters you can sign up for. I think it's a great idea to sign up to all the newsletters by the big funding organizations. So the European Commission has one. By reflex, I wanted to say USAID, but no, USAID not obviously anymore. But the Ford Foundation has a newsletter, the Gates Foundation has a newsletter, and they inform about funding opportunities. So I've signed up to so many newsletters I can't count. I have an email address just for newsletters, and then I regularly, once a week, I check. I don't read every single one, but I kind of check what came in to get a good overview. Um, there's not really one service that I would recommend. Obviously, I would recommend our own database that we have developed because I know how much work went into that. And I believe that it's a really, really helpful tool to find donors. That is donordatabase.org. It's also a very affordable service in comparison to some of the other paid services. So if you're looking for a database, maybe check out donordatabase.org. Um, and then there's a question, how do I get to understand the nature of donors' interest in terms of proposal writing and alignment of their funding criteria? Well, in general, I think it's just important that you understand how a donor understands their mission, what they want to achieve and how they want to achieve it, and what are the tools that they think make sense to achieve something. And sometimes the result can be that maybe you don't want to be working with a donor. That can also happen. But it is important, I think, to look at the donor holistically. Why do they do the work that they do? What is their motive? What is the mission that they want to achieve? And then how do they want to achieve that mission? So which kind of activities would they fund? Which kind of projects or approaches, strategies would they fund? What is important in a proposal is to show relevance for the donor. The donor has their mission, and you need to show that you can support them in achieving their mission, and that your project is relevant to what they want to do. Because then it's easy for them to say, oh, well, they're helping us. And usually the person who decides where a grant goes is also the person who has to justify that to their seniors or to other people. And the easier you make it for them, the better. Because if they can say, well, this project actually aligns 90% with what we want to do, and it really helps us to achieve our goal of educating all girls in this area or whatever, then it's easy for them to justify that project to their seniors, and they are going to pick your project. So the alignment is what you really want to be showing here. There's the next question. Well, I can start with the number two, a directory of funders. That's difficult. Also, because there's so many different projects out there. It's very difficult to put something like that together. Again, I can recommend our database. I hope that is still accurate. We used to have a test phase of 1 week. So you can try the database for free for 1 week, and you can get as kind of a soft copy. You can copy names of donors from there that you can start researching and using. And about the freezing of aid by President Trump, well, that's a whole topic for itself. I think it all left us all in a very difficult situation. I think it's completely irresponsible. I think, yeah, it's a decision that will haunt us forever. And there's no 100% compensation there yet, obviously, because many other countries as well are pulling back their aid money. Which in Germany, for example, we have a new government, and they just slashed the BMZ budget by 30%. Which, yeah, I'm not going to share my opinion because I just start cursing, I think, because I think it's very stupid. But I think foundations are stepping up to a degree. So looking for foundations, I think there's new systems that we will have to develop, working with corporations, bringing in more responsible people that do have resources to share their resources, etc. There's a couple of new systems that will come out of this. In the short term, I think trying to ramp up donation systems, and trying to address more foundations, putting more work into this area is going to be the solution. Long term, definitely we have to come up with different systems of funding these to a degree, public services because we can't go without. I think on our YouTube channel, we also have a webinar where my colleague Eric addresses this specifically, what happens now after USAID disappeared. So maybe you can also check that out. And then I'll just take this last question because I've already went over time. It's hard connecting to a donor, even though we have a good sounding proposal aimed at contributing to issues like climate change, sustainability, etc. Yeah, I think it is just with a proposal, with an open call, it's very, very difficult to get through these days. Because of the overwhelm of proposals, because there's so many organizations that enter the fundraising field now that maybe were funded by USAID and now suddenly have to address foundations as well. So the competition has gotten much more intense. So I think the key is networking. The key is getting to know a donor, making yourself known as a reliable and good partner before you send any proposal. And there's still plenty of foundations out there that do fund environmental issues, climate change, climate mitigation, etc. I think you have to research, find the good partners for you, interact with them, whichever way is possible, either through email, phone calls, maybe a Zoom call, get to know them and become a good partner to them. I know this is a lot of work. It's an additional burden on organizations that are already heavily burdened by all the things they have to do. But unfortunately, I think that is the way out of this. But also, if you develop those good relationships, they will pay off long term. Because once you are on the radar of a foundation, once you are seen as a good partner, once you've proven yourself as a good partner, it's much easier to get funding in the future. And if you see your future with foundations, I think networking and developing this network is key to that. Okay, thank you so much also for the interesting questions and for being part of this webinar. Thank you to Trust as well for organizing this with us together. I hope this is not going to be the last one that we'll do together. If you have any questions, please let us know at here, info@philanthropia.org. Check out the things we have to offer and the services that Trust Consultancy has to offer if you're interested in this field. And again, I hope to see you soon in one of our other webinars. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.